Hey everybody, Raghu. I'm back with Mindrolling, and I'm just meeting someone brand new, and her name is Shermin Kruse. Is that good?
That's excellent.
That's good.
That's
Okay.
excellent. Admirable.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she has an extraordinary book, really, called Stoic Empathy. And I'm sure everybody like me, Stoic? First of all, Stoic on its own is scary. And, everybody goes, oh my God, what are we going to have to do? And get into ice baths every day for a couple of hours, I don't know. So
it's actually a frequently used example of building
really?
Stoic resilience and discomfort embracing. Yes.
Yeah, right. And that's a reality in terms of discomfort. Embracing is a real thing that, I've spent a lot of time in India, right, over the years.
Yeah.
As people who listen to this podcast know. And I'm going back there actually in a bit. And I was just talking to someone about just some mundane thing about being in India in a circumstance. And I just said, yeah, no, that might be difficult for me, for us. As far as the Indians go, they know how to live with discomfort better than most people that I have met around the planet. Maybe that's just...
They do. And it's interesting because just as much as the example of an ice bath is used, so is the example of meditation, particularly long periods of meditation or silent meditation or meditation retreats that test the boundaries of human comfort, pain, etc. So those are just different examples because it depends on what it is you find most uncomfortable and how it is that you can challenge that particular discomfort to the extent that you deem it appropriate for your own personal growth, not because it's something that you have to do with everything that you find uncomfortable. Yeah. But if you find all forms of confrontation, for example, uncomfortable to the point where it harms you in your life because you can't have a conversation with your best friend about an issue that's arisen in your relationship, then maybe that is something that you learn to embrace through practices, exercises. And if it is sitting still with your own thoughts, which I personally find terrifying, then and I practice meditation every day, but some days it's really an act of courage because being alone with myself can be, depending on the day, quite difficult. And so, everybody has their point and their area of discomfort. The real trick, Raghu, is isolating that which makes you uncomfortable. See, for a lot of people who would call themselves Stoic, what makes them uncomfortable is vulnerability or connection, right? And the idea is if you can take a punch in the face, you should be able to take a stab in the heart. And if you can take it and you deem the person you're risking it with to be worth it, and you still don't go for it, that's cowardice. And, and so a lot of it is that, and it is a little bit of a reframing from the Stoicized version of Stoicism that has sort of taken over in the United States of just, hey, toughen up and, be a man or whatever, and you can take it and don't feel anything. It doesn't reflect Greek philosophy of justice at all.
Yeah, I imagine. By the way, that our national quote around this, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. It's one of the great football coaches in American football. It's like quoted
American
everywhere.
American football combines, this is, I'm going to offend half your audience, it combines the worst aspects of American society. Yeah, which is brutal violence punctuated by committee meetings. The worst aspects of American society.
Yeah, it's the Roman arena.
My daughter plays. Yes, absolutely. The Roman arena, the modern Roman arena. So where in India are you returning to this summer? Are you going north to Dharamshala or Shimla or any place fun like that, or in the south?
No, we were in northern India, yes. but in a place called the Kumaon, Uttarakhand is where it is. It's near, the British built this beautiful city around a lake called Nainital, and to get away from the heat. And so they go up into the foothills. And nearby there was the ashram where I and many Westerners, not that many though, when you really consider what it's like today, you know, in terms of people having followers and all that, just a few hundred people. And it was in a beautiful pocket of a valley. So I am going to just, you know, pay my respects, so to speak, and just be able to sit in the forest for a bit. So, yeah, that's where we were.
And I'm curious, how are you going to get there? Are you going to land in Delhi and then just do one of those dreadful bus rides through the mountains?
No, maybe when in my early 20s.
And hope you don't die kind of a situation.
No way. I'm way too old for that. No. In my early 20s, that's what we did. We all went up there on this bus, and I won't even tell you the horror of where it would stop, and you'd have to go to the bathroom. I mean, it's just, Ramdas has a great...
I've been there.
Yeah, you've been there, I bet. You know, that leads me to think about, why don't you share with people, you're from Iran, why don't you share with people how you came through being there, and you have, in the book, you certainly relate different memories of being a child and your family and people that you really point to, your aunt, Leela, is it? Lily. Yeah. Do you want to do that? Just so we get to know you a little bit?
Yeah. It's great to get to know one another. I was born in 1977, which makes me 48. So I'm pushing 50, which I like to remind my children makes me almost half a century old, which I actually think is exhilarating, and practically a revered elder already. I was born in 1977. The revolution occurred in 1979. So the Iranian Islamic Revolution happened within a rather condensed period of time. And it began as a democratic revolution, but ended up becoming an oppressive and patriarchal, dictatorial religious regime that took over the country. So there were all of these impositions of new norms, new rules, new laws that we had not culturally assimilated to them. They basically weren't there yesterday, and they're there today. So as a community, as a population, as a people, as a citizenship, we were sort of in a constant mode of adjustment. Then in 1980, Iraq, our neighbor, decided to declare war on Iran, take advantage of the vulnerabilities of the government at that time. And we went into a protracted, decade-long war, and that's the Iran-Iraq War, where the famous Iran-Contra affair arises out of, if you'll recall, back in the 80s, where the United States was selling weapons to both sides in the conflict. That war resulted in approximately 1 million civilian deaths. Just to give you an understanding, there was about 40 million people in Iran at the time. So 1 out of every 40 people. And there was a lot of, not too dissimilar from Kyiv these days, a lot of civilian missile strikes into Tehran, the capital city where I lived. By the time I left in 1988, there was up to 6 strikes a day in Tehran. And we had already lived through nearly the most of the first decade of the revolution. But that was when we finally
grew up in.
That's how I grew up. And, it's interesting because on the one hand, you have this constant need to adapt. I mean, literally, you get in a taxi cab, you have to be able to read the driver so you know whether you can complain about the regime or not, or whether it would get you in trouble. So your ability to read the room, to adapt to the people in the room, to deliver what they expect of you is really exemplary by the time you leave a situation like this, just because of survival instinct. And interestingly, for me, that ability continued to advance and develop as I got older, into Canada as an immigrant, into the corporate world as someone who'd never seen the inside of an office building when I graduated from law school. And I found myself, and this sounds so cliche to say because it's this term authenticity has become so trendy now, but I found myself really not being able to connect with my authentic self. I'd become so good at chameleoning myself in every aspect of life. And I still want to succeed, of course. I still want to adapt to particular social situations. But there was something that was missing. I was going home at the end of the day, every day, with a feeling of profound loneliness. And I think it's because I wasn't there. And so then I began a long process of controlling the way I entered the situation to such an extent that would ensure integrity, adaptation to the extent I deem it necessary to comply with my own responsibilities in that situation, and authenticity to the extent that I can. And that is really where I studied Stoicism my entire life, but that's really where the term started to take hold for me in my personal development, and of course as an advocate as well, because I wanted to show up this way to court. I wanted to show up this way to my board meetings, to my internal office meetings. I wanted to show up this way to meditation. I wanted to show up this way to therapy. The number of times I showed up to therapy and performed for my therapist, I don't know if anyone else is guilty of this or if it's just me, but the number of times I showed up just to demonstrate my own emotional maturity and superiority instead of actually utilizing the session for the purpose for which it was intended, quite a few. And I still struggle to this day, but that is what really brought me to this way of being and thinking and viewing justice.
Yeah, can we go back though? When I mentioned your Aunt Lily, can you tell that story, because it is so? I loved it. It just her dance and how it affected you and what it and you interpreted it as such.
I tell a story at the very start of the book about, and she doesn't like being called Aunt Lily, even though it's normally the respectful way to address somebody in my culture. It makes her feel old. She's the only one in the family. We're not allowed to address her as Aunt. We have to just call her Lily. So Lily, I tell this story of her dancing, but really as a very small example of the microcosm that is our people. Dancing and Persian dancing is literally like moving like water, right? The idea is to move like water as you dance. So it's not just a belly dance or a hip dance or a leg dance, but it's an arm dance, it's a head dance, it's a chest dance, it's all of it, right? Everything coming together, the entire body, and everything flowing naturally and spontaneously and rhythmically without a great deal of repetition, just constant improvisation. And it's big in Iran. Every chance you get, you dance. And even people who say, no, I really shouldn't dance, they're just saying that so you can drag them onto the dance floor. It's just like a cultural thing that we do. And after the revolution, dance was forbidden. And parties were forbidden. And of course, any kind of drugs or drinking was forbidden. And so nothing stopped. Everything just moved underground. And some of that is really beautiful and a demonstration of the resilience of a people to hold on to their identity and to their passions and to their heart. And some of it got kind of dark. You know, when you take all of these parties and you move them underground, a lot of things end up happening that go unchecked. And a lot of mistakes are made, and a lot of really dark things can happen too. But the family parties were always safe. So every time we got together, it was once a week, we'd get together as a family. People took turns hosting. And it was always illegal. And you always had to, sort of bribe the neighborhood patrol officers to lay off and buy your illegal vodka and whiskey and hope you don't get caught with a kind of a situation, and play your illegal music and then dance to it as you eat and as you talk and as you mingle with cousins and uncles and aunts. And it was such a statement of just being as a form of defiance. And it was really the strength to show up in those moments and in that manner the strength that it took. And I tell the story about my aunt because she was particularly free with her movements. She was particularly unconventional with how she approached the dance floor, which really reflected her essence. But really, it's my people. That's how they are. And that's the environment and society that I grew up in. And it's a kind of a resilience and a kind of a stoicism that is very counter to the image of the statue, stoic, white male figure that we think about when we imagine Greek stoicism, right? And the interesting thing about stoicism is all that it has in common with Buddhism and mindfulness and meditation and dance and passion and all of those things. And so that's really what geared me toward really digging in. What were these old guys talking about 2,000 years ago? To what extent does it ring true in various cultural formats or in various societies to this day? To what extent is it confirmed by modern scientific, neuroscientific research and understanding? And to what extent is it really similar to a kind of an empathy? Yeah. So that's the story, and that's a really good snapshot into the people. The other story I like to tell a lot is the encounter between my mom on the streets of Tehran while she and I were shopping together, and a morality police guard who was very angry that my headscarf wasn't on and that hers wasn't on properly. And her ability to utilize empathy and understanding and her stoic control over her emotions, her anxiety, her fear, her anger, her frustration, that got us out of that situation because we had no political power in that situation. There was no amount of financial power that could have gotten us out. There was just my mom understanding herself, understanding the guard, and utilizing that understanding to keep us safe. And so that's the other big one about Iran. But there are so many with shells and rockets pouring down upon us. People of a war-torn country have much to teach about resilience and love.
Yes, absolutely. Oh boy, can I just? There's one great paragraph to describe Stoic empathy. Can I read it?
Absolutely.
Stoic empathy, in essence, is the delicate balance of strength and sensitivity, resilience and understanding. It's the quiet resolve to confront life's adversities with unwavering fortitude, coupled with strategic empathy. We'll have to get into strategic empathy as well. That serves us as well as other. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Through this synthesis, I've not only found solace and serenity within myself, but also unlocked the potential to effect meaningful change in the world around me. With the union of Stoicism and empathy, anyone can transcend the confines of our individual existence, contribute to the collective tapestry of human experience, and forge a more compassionate, resilient, and harmonious world. A world that honors the inherent dignity and worth of every person and sows the seed of positive transformation. I like that. It's just, it begs...
Thank you.
I mean, this part, strategic empathy, maybe. But just like meditation, in my experience, and we're talking personally as well as people that I've known for a long time.
Yeah.
The more that you get that you're in the I place, I am meditating, I am going to do this, the more that happens, whatever it is that you want as an outcome, which starting out you shouldn't want that. You want to be, not look for. But we're in the West, in the West, this is our lives. We want outcomes, period, proof. So, but that can get in the way, of course, in the way of having a spacious, present experience. So, yeah, what do you think about that?
About the relationship between expectation and actual becoming?
No, more about the point of view, the perspective that a person has in their day-to-day life, that when they are wanting to, for instance, cultivate empathy, cultivate stoicism, whenever that I is there, it kind of messes up everything, because then you're just attaching the same egoistic things that you do on a day-to-day basis. It's all about me. Me. You wake up in the morning, it's the movie of me. I did an audio book about this with my podcast friend Duncan Trussell, who I got to get you with Duncan too one of these days. He will love going into this subject. But yeah, you wake up in the morning, you write the story. You're the actor in every role. You're the producer. You even write your own reviews, and it goes on 24/7. Me. And so there has to be something that is a wedge to at least present this kind of a view, so that you have some understanding that you're going into it wanting an outcome. You're going into it, you're doing something. You are a doer, and therefore in that doing, you are satisfied right there. You know what I mean? This is the way we are as humans.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So there's so much here that you say that I'd like to comment on, but please feel free to jump in if I'm babbling too much.
No.
The first is actually not empathy, but the Stoic ideal of dichotomy of control. The Stoics utilize the example of the archer. The archer, right, shows up to an archery competition. The archer would like to win that archery competition. They enjoy archery very much. They've practiced. They got good sleep the night before. They ate a good meal. They have their bows. They have their arrow. They eye their target. They pull the arrow. They aim, and they release. So the way I view, and the way Stoicism views this, as well as the concept of empathy, is all that is in your control as an individual, as a component, as the drop, right? All that is in your control prior to the release, and all that is out of your control after the release. And so the idea is, once the arrow is in the air, there is absolutely nothing that you can do. You are irrelevant at that point to where the arrow lands. But you're not irrelevant in the overall process of aiming, practicing, benefiting, right? So a surgeon operating on a child who's been shot 7 times by his father is not irrelevant. And the way they approach that situation and the impact they have, but nor can they control everything that happens in that operating room, right? Nor should their level of empathy or their type of empathy, even their sort of empathy for the child, be the same as that of the child's mother. They have a different responsibility, a different relational function in connection with one another. And to the extent that we need to cooperate with one another as a species in order to advance one another forward as much as possible and advance ourselves, from a practical, daily living, practicing, moving, acting point of view, there's a certain kind of language that works best with that for me. From a philosophical point of view, a spiritual point of view, when I was delivering my 4th child, Cole, so I had twins, and then 2 years later I had another one, and then 2 years later I had another one. So I had 4 kids, really kind of compressed timeline. And so when I had Cole, I already had 3 kids under the age of 4 at home. He was my 4th kid under the age of 4. And he was a vaginal delivery. Thankfully, with one of the pregnancies, the twin pregnancy, the babies were breached. There was no way to do it vaginally in a safe manner. But he was a vaginal delivery. So there I am, and he's coming out, and I actually reach down and touch his head as he is emerging into the world, from the world of me into this world. And I will tell you, Raghu, I'm not a religious person. I would not describe myself as a deeply spiritual person. I try to connect to aspects of faith. It's very difficult for me. Faith was a very, very oppressive tool for me when I was used against me as a child. And it has been a very difficult uphill journey for me. So this is not something that just happens to me. I wasn't high. I wasn't on any drugs. There was nothing like that. But I had an experience that was literally out of this world. In that moment, I did not exist. In that moment, everything was the same thing. And I don't even know how long it lasted.
When you went to touch his head?
A fraction of a second. It might have lasted.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes,
when you went
when
to
I touched his head. It could have been as much as 5. I was just transported. I had this euphoric, weird out-of-body experience where for the first time in my life, everything let go. And I think it was for a minute or two. It could have been for a fraction of a second. I really have no idea. I could not judge time within that moment. It passed eventually. And with one exception, I have not been able to regain it, no matter what I've done, including the use of psychedelics. Mm-hmm. So I've never had that experience again. And it could be because I'm not connected to things maybe the way that you are. Maybe I was in that moment. But in my daily living, I'm just not. And it could be that this is just not my lived experience. My lived experience is a very practical, I'm going to get shot in the face. I'm going to get shot in the face because I don't have my headscarf on unless I can figure out a way out of this. And is that the way I want to be approaching the world? No, I mean, of course not. But in that moment, when the morality police is holding on to the trigger of their Russian assault rifle that's hanging around their neck and so much bigger than me because I'm an 11-year-old scrawny little girl and they're huge and they're imposing and they're just dark and scary, that is where my mind immediately goes. Sometimes my mind goes to picking up a weapon. Sometimes my mind goes to taking cover in a cowardly fashion. And sometimes my mind goes to protecting those around me. And all I'm trying to do here, I am not ambitious enough yet at this point in my life to try to achieve anything further. All I'm trying to do is show up in that moment in a manner that after the moment has passed, I can say, I did the right thing. In that situation, I did the right thing.
Yeah.
That's hard. That's really hard for me. I think for most people, it's really hard to show up in a situation where you matter, you are relevant, right? And behave in a way that when you go home later that night, you think, that's the way I would do it again, right? And if you don't show up the right way, and the arrow goes up into the sky, then to be able to engage in that analysis, not in a, I'm going to punch myself out for being such an idiot in the way I shot that arrow, but I wonder how I can approach the next arrow. How can I improve? And again, a lot of this has to do with what I believe are my responsibilities toward the world, which are going to be different than what other people feel are their responsibilities toward the world. So it has to be an individualistic decision framework that takes place. And the use of empathy in all of that, in my book, it depends on the relationship. And it depends on what you believe is owed in that particular relationship, is just, is balance, right? And I have this belief in willpower. And I think that there is space between stimuli and response. That is us. That is the mind, the soul, the will, the spirit, whatever you want to call it. And our ability to control that space. That's where I'm trying to get for myself. It's, in my opinion, an ambitious but also a very meager goal.
What do you mean by control the space?
Okay. So one
I
of the
find, just
things
to say,
that
I find that whenever I am relating with anything and I like to control space in the way that I understand that, I find that that is a detrimental thing in the end.
Yeah. So this is it's a very different approach. This approach, the idea behind it is as follows. It is, you know how for a professional athlete, when a ball comes at them at 90 miles an hour, it somehow is slower. Their ability to see the approaching stimuli is slower. That way they can respond with more intentionality and deliberate measure, right? In a manner that is appropriate toward the ball. They can swing the bat in a way that hits it better. You have a lot more influence and encounter than I do. I met the Dalai Lama once when I was in my 20s. I have done some meditation in my life, but nowhere near sort of where you are. But one of the things I've observed in practiced monks is their ability to modulate pain in their bodies. It is remarkable. I literally feel more pain than they do. And I don't know how, I don't really know the magic that they have figured out, but they do. They interface and interact with their mind. Their will interfaces and interacts with their mind in a way that normally I don't. I get pissed off when somebody cuts in front of me in traffic, right? And so just to be able to...
You're the only one, of course.
Yeah, I'm the only one. But just to be able to slow that down and be able to contemplate to what extent does this matter? To what extent does this really affect me? To be able to cognitively engage or emotionally engage in the analysis rather than viewing it as something that just happened to me. Of course I got pissed off. I got cut off in traffic. It's a very normal response, right? Is it? Right? And does it have to be? And how much of that is up to me? And how much of it isn't? Right? And how much of it just isn't up to me? And I'm curious about that question. And so I go into these situations asking that question. And I approach the fMRI studies asking that question. And I approach meditation asking that question. Can I embrace the chronic pain that I am in a manner that frees me of the pain? Or am I a slave to the pain? And I use the language of control just because in my vernacular, that's an easy way for me to understand it. It might not be the word that you would use because I look at it as this dichotomy. There's so much that I can't control, but there are some things that I can, right? There are some things that are, particularly as a citizen in a society, that are my responsibility. And I try to move through life that way. It's a little bit more simplistic, I suppose, than perhaps the non-ego, non-control way in which you move. And perhaps your methodologies...
By the way, you're giving more credit than is due on that one. Okay. But you know what I think? You're speaking to that word, control. First of all, words are birds. You know, we have such a different projection or connection to them, whatever it means to us. I would say, because yes, when you are mindfulness, for instance, when you are walking around and you get to see your tremendous self-interest, separation, all of the things as humans that we grow into after somebody gives us a name. Oh, I'm I'm Raghu. Oh my God, what I thought I was everything. Now I'm a certain thing. I think then using a method like mindfulness meditation, where you see these things and you want to grow because we want to be happy within ourselves and we want to feel like we're making some contribution to the world that we live in, then you get an intention. Okay? There's an intention to be able to look more deeply into the things that you are seeing through this manifestation of being mindful and being aware. The problem, the problem is, again, I go back to the me thing, where you can use that it's called spiritual bypass. You can use that to support your continued egoistic behavior. So
Yes.
At the end of his life, Ram Dass came up with a meditative practice that we certainly suggest all the time. And what it is, it's called loving awareness. The idea is to get into that place in our central to our being, soul, whatever anybody wants to call it, spirit, true self, whatever the tradition is. They all have a word for it. And to breathe into that place and out of the I, the stories we tell ourselves, all the thoughts we believe in and so on. I am, and move into the center of your chest. I am loving awareness. I am loving awareness. And, you're repeating that until you just become that awareness. From there, you can then really go deeper into yourself to understand what it is that is making that roadblock so that you are not able to be at one with yourself and be able to be of some service else with whoever around you. So that was that intention may be very similar to how you're speaking to it through control, like doing something, right?
Yeah. Taking action, even if that action is intentional inaction, as long as it is intentional and purposeful and what you decided was the right thing to do. It's what really blows my mind is I don't even know if I am the same person from moment to moment. I don't know if the idea of the self, the true self, is consistent or changing. And a part of me would really like to believe that it is changing, that it is adaptable, because then I can become a better true self than I was yesterday, right? I can grow, but other people have a different view where it's just the more layers you peel, the more in touch with the true self you become, right? Versus there's some better version of me that I can become tomorrow, right? Mm. And so I don't actually know which of these is true. All I know is from a practical action sort of way, I can become a better surgeon. I can become a better mother. I can serve my children better. And the best way that that can be accomplished in my life is to try to slow down that space between stimuli and response, to act with intention, and to try to be as honest as I can about what justice would require in such a scenario so that I don't rationalize injustice. It is so easy, so easy. I've never met a villain who thought they were the villain. Villains don't think they're the villains. Villains they think they're the hero every time. It's a terrifying thought. And it's also very humanizing because it means I'm like that too, right? We all are to some extent.
Righteous.
And how can I, maybe to go back to your language, Raghu, and to take a chapter from your book, eradicate the sort of negative aspects of control, the negative aspects of I, so that what I'm seeking in my path is something beyond a justification of my actions, but rather I'm acting in a manner that is consistent with what ought to be, right? And so I approach it linguistically from a much more practical sort of daily use point of view. Here's what you do and what you do when you are dealing with your child over tech time usage. Here's what here are some of the mistakes that I have made. Here are some of the things that I have done. Here are some of the things that we can do a little bit better. Here are some of the tools, some of the practices. Meditation is a big one. The loving awareness meditation is very difficult for me. My dad is a lot better at it than I am, although he's a transcendental meditator, not a mindfulness meditator. And he's very practiced at that. He was given his mantra by a monk in like the 50s in Iran, and he still won't tell me what it is. And I'm like, Dad, you're 1,000,000 years old. What do you think is going to happen if you tell me?
That's funny.
He won't tell me what it is. I know. Yeah. And I don't know how he does it. It's a different, what he can do is just different. What I can do is different. I can show up to a very, very fast-paced environment and figure out solutions immediately. And he just moves through the world very differently than I do. He flows differently. I certainly don't think it's worse. It might be better. But I just want to be able to, in the way that I move, I just want to be a little bit more deliberate and intentional and not justify my own conduct after the act.
You know, in the book, you talk about someone who's a dear friend and who was with us in India when, as I mentioned to you, we went back with Ram Dass and met this incredible being, Neem Karoli Baba, the renowned psychologist, Dr. Daniel Goleman. And I've done a number of podcasts with him. And we just did one recently. I said, Danny, we got to revisit emotional intelligence because that is so absolutely crucial to anybody having any kind of a grip on the psychology of their day-to-day existence. Emotional intelligence. But how he said. He detailed cognitive empathy, as you say, as the capacity to know, quote unquote, how the other person feels and what they might be thinking. I mean, that's just crucial. You say it doesn't absorb us in the emotional state, but gives a map of that journey, allowing us to intellectualize another's emotions without feeling them firsthand. So I guess.
One of the things. Go ahead, please. I interrupted inadvertently.
No. No, I was just going to say that you can't get to the curiosity of exploring all of these things without judging the way that we judge. You can't get there without some stability. That emotional intelligence and the reality of that can give you in all walks of life, a career, working with people especially, and that's what led me to have Danny do another podcast with me on that, was stuff that was going on in my workplace and how that constantly came up, and after all these decades of doing this work, I still see myself falling into the emotional immature era. And I think that's super important.
I love that you call Dr. Goleman Danny. I think that's insane. I am now having to utilize Stoic empathy to deal with my jealousy at the fact that you get to hang out with Danny.
He has a Hindu name too.
What's the Hindu name?
Jagannath Das. So Jagannath in the Hindu pantheon is a form of Krishna. And there's an amazing temple all the way on the east side of India. And they do a procession every year, and they bring out the Murti, the statue, and everything. It's quite a thing. Only the Hindu culture could produce such a thing, as far as I'm concerned. But he got that. We all got our names from Neem Karoli Baba.
Incredible. What a life you've lived. What experiences you've had. And
say the least.
Well, and if I may, it's a gift, because not everybody, some people live and die on the 10th floor of a refugee camp. I mean, the fact that you've been able to have these experiences is so extraordinary. And then the fact that you've been able to behave responsibly toward them is also something to be amazed about. Often I actually think about that, because just the place where I am in life, the mere fact that my children are American citizens, that they have adequate health care and access to education and books and travel, and people of different linguistic backgrounds and cultures from a very young age. All of these things are gifts. They didn't really earn them, right? I earned it for them. And so they have this responsibility that comes with what the gifts bring, which I think is power. And they have this responsibility to then interact and interface with the world in a manner that asks more of them than it otherwise would have. And I tell them that all the time. You owe more to the world than someone who hasn't had all of this. And that can mean whatever you want it to mean. That can mean you grow up to be a surgeon who, saves lives, but it could mean you're a clown in a children's home and you bring smiles to children's faces. It could mean anything you want it to mean, as long as that is the approach that you're taking toward the world. You're not clowning because you were too lazy to go to medical school. You're clowning because that is what you have found is your way of making the world a little bit of a better place and giving yourself to it. Yeah, this is, and as for Dr. Goleman and emotional intelligence, his coinage of the term's brilliant. And as you know, philosophers and monks and religious figures have essentially been talking about this for thousands of years before it was understood in sort of modern terms and demonstrated in a laboratory and an academic setting.
Yeah. We don't have a lot of time left, so there's one thing that I definitely wanted to bring up, because we have we have retreats that we've done with Ram Dass over the years, and now he's been gone about 6 years. And we still continue them because people really love to have a setting where they can interact and leave their egos at the door and be free and do practices and listen to different spiritual talks and so on. So one of the big things that I used to bring this up with Ram Dass all the time, was trust. What does that really mean? Because I said to him one day, this is more of a humorous thing, not really, somewhat. I said, the first trust that I ever really had, aside from obviously initially with my mother as a baby, but the first
parental.
Yeah, parental. But that was only in the very, very beginning. The rest of that wasn't so good for me. I mean, you came from a wonderful family.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah, no, it was terrible. But
my dad.
Yeah, that's a whole other story about what happened, because my whole entire family came to India and completely let go into this tradition. I'm very unusual and the Indians look at me and go, "You're like an Indian family," you know. So there's an amazing karma there. But I said, Ramdas, the first time I met you, just looking, you know, he had these beautiful blue eyes, and he was so present, and he could erase Richard Alpert, erase Ramdas, just a pool of unconditionality. What do you need? The universe, just ask whatever you need. And it was a trust that engendered that I had never really experienced before. And I went through lots of stuff because of my father and family, and he was PTSD'd from the war and all that stuff. And I said, really, that was probably the most important. It got me to follow you back to India. You know, just quit the one. I had an incredible job. I was a program director of a major radio station, rock and roll. And I just up and quit. And I said, just tell me where to go. It was that kind of talk about will. And then I said, what about you? What was your first real trust? And he looked at me and he went, mushrooms, meaning the psilocybin mushroom. Yeah. And that is what gave him what you had, that experience that you described, giving birth and touching the head of your child. That unity is, I mean, you said you've taken psychedelics, so even if you hadn't had that thing, you know, it's that complete. You certainly have the inkling to know the interconnectivity of all blah, blah, blah. So that's what he had. And when he met this being, you know, well, he first started taking psychedelics 62, and he met, you know, so 5 years later, he had this experience. And he said, I wouldn't have been able to understand what this was without the unitive experience of psychedelics. So that's why he said, mushrooms. That was my first trust.
Interesting. I hope I communicate this the right way. I have a very difficult time trusting anything other than people. So I even have a difficult time trusting faith. I have a difficult time trusting love. I have a difficult time trusting anything other than a person. And that person I trust with all my being, all my heart and soul, because evidentiary-wise, they have proven to me over and over and over and over and over again that they are worthy of that much vulnerability. Now, having said that, I'm a person who loves very deeply. I'm a person who moves through the world with a lot of trust. I just mean from a deep emotional, you know, really surrender kind of Sufism, mysticism kind of level. I can't do that with really anything other than a handful of people. What I work on a daily basis is ridding myself, anger is a little bit easier, ridding myself of resentment and breaking down the barriers of resentment, which is very difficult for me. Resentment is so much stickier than anger for me. It just, it really freaking clings on. Like, you know, I have young kids, so it's like when your kids get glue in the carpet or slime in the carpet, like it just clings on and just doesn't want to come off no matter what you do. And I work really, really hard at that. And through that process, I'm able to increase the trust that I can allow myself to feel. For me, my experiences have always been, there's my family, they're my me, they're a part of me, and they will always back me up, which I actually think is like, again, I think it's another gift. It sounds like it's something you didn't have. And yet it is the most natural thing in the world. This is the way it's supposed to be, right? And there's something that just feels so right about it. And then I work really hard at expanding that to all mankind to various degrees, right? Various extents. Because obviously, the way I'm going to trust my mother or my daughter or my sister or my best friend of 25, quarter of a century, 25 years, etc., is going to be very different than the way I trust my the agent at the counter is doing the best they can to get me on the right flight, right? I mean, but it's a form of it, and practicing it and allowing that connection and that relationship to form is incredibly beneficial to my existence as a human being, as long as I'm able to do it with my eyes open, wisely, and I'm able to do it with responsibility and not in an irresponsible manner. I'm working on that. And I feel like with that, I'm making some progress. But in terms of trusting a particular way of being, I don't know. That one sounds a lot harder.
No. Yeah, I couldn't go there myself. No, I mean, we, as I said, introduced to this being, starting with Ram Dass, but introduced to this being who was no longer polarized. There was no two things going on. There was only the unitive one living in that. So that trust was easy to get to, as long as I was around that. When I wasn't around that, I was killing myself, berating
That's
for whatever.
interesting. So you almost didn't even have any control over it because it's just a transformation that sort of took place in that moment.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Yeah. I mean, that is very similar to what I felt when I was delivering coal, but I've never had that for a prolonged period of time.
Yeah. Well, since then, I've never had it for a prolonged period of time either. Okay, that ain't easy. And,
that ain't easy,
and listen, you know who you'd love? I don't know why I thought of this. Okay, do you know she's a Zen master?
Okay.
Her name is Roshi Joan Halifax.
Okay, what a name.
Yeah, and she has a retreat center in Santa Fe, New Mexico, nearby. And fancy. I don't know why. I think you would love her because she is absolutely, she's the most perfect example of Stoicism that I ever met before, although she never mentions that word. But there is that complete immersion in directing energy to cut through and not be at the mercy of discomfort.
Yeah. Yes, or jealousy or envy or
yes.
anxiety or, fear or whatever it might be that's getting in the way. By the way, because all of those things can be good. Discomfort can tell you something about it. It communicates information. It's worthy to note. Yeah. You just don't want to be at the mercy of it. Exactly what you just said. Yeah,
exactly that. So you got to look her up.
This has been such. Yes, I will.
Roshi Joan Halifax.
Like the Canadian city.
Yep. Yeah. I'm from. I grew up in Montreal, by the way.
I immigrated to Toronto.
Yeah, where I was born.
So parlez-vous français, Raghu?
Oui, je parle français, mais pas très couramment maintenant. Oh, boy. It's great to have you here. Great to have you here. It's so wonderful to meet you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me. Shermin
you too.
Kruse. And we are you'll send me something that we'll be able to put the links in the show notes so people can purchase the book. When is it coming out?
The book came out in April.
Oh, it's been
of 2025. It's been out. They put out the hardcover, the audiobook, and the Kindle. They're putting out the paperback next April. And as I'm sure you know, I don't really control most of those decisions, but that's the decision that they have made, and I'm excited about it. I'm glad there'll be a more affordable option in the future going forward.
Whatever other links that you would want people to use and to get more information, please, you'll send that and we'll put that into into the podcast notes as well. So again, thank you so much, everybody. This is Raghu from Mindrolling and Be Here Now Network, and you can get lots more wonderful podcasts from all sorts of very, very enlightened people, teachers. So I will see you next week. Thanks again.
Thank you.